Between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Forces beyond your control can take away everything you possess except one thing: your freedom to choose how you will respond to the situation. When we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves. Life is not primarily a quest for pleasure, as Freud believed, or a quest for power, as Alfred Adler taught, but a quest for meaning. The greatest task for any person is to find meaning in his or her own life. Decisions, not conditions, determine what a man is. Life is never made unbearable by circumstances, but only by lack of meaning and purpose. When a person can't find a deep sense of meaning, they distract themselves with pleasure. Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of human freedoms: to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. Success, like happiness, is the unexpected side effect of one's personal dedication to a cause greater than oneself. The one thing you can't take away from me is the way I choose to respond to what you do to me. Our greatest freedom is the freedom to choose our attitude. Being tolerant does not mean that I share another one's belief, but it does mean that I acknowledge another one's right to believe and obey his own conscience. You don't create your mission in life, you detect it. There are two races of men in this world, but only these two: the race of the decent man and the race of the indecent man. What is to give light must endure burning. The more one forgets one's own self, the more human the person becomes. Live as if you were living a second time, and as though you had acted wrongly the first time. In some ways, suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning, such as the meaning of a sacrifice. It isn't the past which holds us back, it's the future and how we undermine it today. The attempt to develop a sense of humor and to see things in a humorous light is some kind of a trick learned while mastering the art of living. An abnormal reaction to an abnormal situation is normal behavior. The meaning of my life is to help others find meaning in theirs. Life asks of every individual a contribution, and it is up to that individual to discover what it should be. The point is not what we expect from life, but rather what life expects from us. Each of us carries a unique spark of the divine, and each of us is also an inseparable part of the web of life. Every human being has the freedom to change at any instant. Humor was another of the soul's weapons in the fight for self-preservation. If we take a man as he is, we make him worse. But if we take man as he should be, we make him capable of becoming what he can be. Either belief in God is unconditional or it is no belief at all. The quest for meaning is the key to mental health and human flourishing. No man should judge unless he asks himself in absolute honesty whether in a similar situation he might not have done the same. Man's main concern is not to gain pleasure or to avoid pain, but rather to see a meaning in his life. In times of crisis, people reach for meaning. Meaning is strength. Our survival may depend on our seeking and finding it. Even when it is not fully attained, we become better by striving for a higher goal. The one thing you can't take away from me is the way I choose to respond to what you do to me. The last of one's freedoms is to choose one's attitude in any given circumstance. Despair is suffering without meaning. Nothing is likely to help a person overcome or endure troubles than the consciousness of having a task in life. To suffer unnecessarily is masochistic rather than heroic. But there was no need to be ashamed of tears, for tears bore witness that a man had the greatest of courage, the courage to suffer. Between stimulus and response is the freedom to choose. When a man cannot find meaning, he numbs himself with pleasure. Success is total self-acceptance. For the world is in a bad state, but everything will become still worse unless each of us does his best. Self-actualization cannot be attained if it is made an end in itself, but only as a side effect of self-transcendence. The last freedom is choosing your attitude. It is here that we encounter the central theme of existentialism. To live is to suffer, to survive is to find meaning in the suffering. Ever more people today have the means to live, but no meaning to live for. Then I grasped the meaning of the greatest secret that human poetry and human thought and belief have to impart. The salvation of man is through love, and in love. Pain is only bearable if we know it will end, not if we deny it exists. Man's inner strength may raise him above his outward fate. Man can only find meaning for his existence in something outside himself. This is the core of the human spirit. If we can find something to live for, if we can find some meaning to put at the center of our lives, even the worst kind of suffering becomes bearable. If there is meaning in life at all, then there must be meaning in suffering. A human being is a deciding being. Ultimate freedom is a man's right to choose his attitude. Love goes very far beyond the physical person of the beloved. Love is the only way to grasp another human being in the innermost core of his personality. The meaning of our existence is not invented by ourselves, but rather detected. Each man is questioned by life, and he can only answer to life by answering for his own life. To life he can only respond by being responsible. The more one forgives himself by giving himself to a cause to serve or another person to love, the more human he is and the more he actualizes himself. Man's search for meaning is the chief motivation of his life. The existential vacuum manifests itself mainly in a state of boredom. I do not forget any good deed done to me, and I do not carry a grudge for a bad one. The last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. Once an individual's search for meaning is successful, it not only renders him happy, but also gives him the capability to cope with suffering. Life can be pulled by goals just as surely as it can be pushed by drives. Happiness cannot be pursued, it must ensue. What you have experienced, no power on earth can take from you. No one can become fully aware of the very essence of another human being unless he loves him. For what then matters is to bear witness to the uniquely human potential at its best, which is to transform a personal tragedy into a triumph, to turn one's predicament into a human achievement. There is nothing in the world, I venture to say, that would so effectively help one to survive even the worst conditions as the knowledge that there is a meaning in one's life. I do the unpleasant tasks before I do the pleasant ones. Suffering presents us with a challenge to find our goals and purpose in our lives that make even the worst situation worth living through. Man ultimately decides for himself, and in the end, education must be education towards the ability to decide. Since Auschwitz we know what man is capable of, and since Hiroshima we know what is at stake. The angels are lost in perpetual contemplation of an infinite glory. Ultimately, man should not ask what the meaning of his life is, but rather he must recognize that it is he who is asked. I never would have made it if I could not have laughed. It lifted me momentarily out of this horrible situation, just enough to make it livable. The last of human freedoms, the ability to choose one's attitude, especially an attitude of gratitude in a given set of circumstances, especially in difficult circumstances. Man is not fully conditioned and determined, but rather determines himself whether he gives into conditions or stands up to them. Love is the ultimate and the highest goal to which man can aspire. Human kindness can be found in all groups, even those which as a whole it would be easy to condemn. At any moment, man must decide, for better or for worse, what will be the monument of his existence. There are only two races, the decent and the indecent. It is always important to have something yet to do in life. Life requires of man spiritual elasticity, so that he may temper his efforts to the chances that are offered. A life of short duration could be so rich in joy and love that it could contain more meaning than a life lasting 80 years. No one can take away my freedom to choose how I will react. Life ultimately means taking the responsibility to find the right answer to its problems and to fulfill the tasks which it constantly sets for each individual. In his creative work, the artist is dependent on sources and resources deriving from the spiritual unconscious. Happiness cannot be attained by wanting to be happy. It must come as the unintended consequence of working for a goal greater than oneself. Set me like a seal upon thy heart. Love is as strong as death. It is well known that humor, more than anything else in the human makeup, can afford an aloofness and an ability to rise above any situation, even if only for a few seconds. One can choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances. Everywhere man is confronted with fate, with a chance of achieving something through his own suffering. Challenging the meaning of life is the truest expression of the state of being human. Fear may come true that which one is afraid of. Thus, human existence, at least as long as it has not been neurotically distorted, is always directed to something or someone other than itself, be it a meaning to fulfill or another human being to encounter lovingly. The salvation of man is through love and in love. I recommend that the Statue of Liberty be supplemented by a Statue of Responsibility on the West Coast. It is not freedom from conditions, but it is freedom to take a stand toward the conditions. We cannot, after all, judge a biography by its length, by the number of pages in it. We must judge by the richness of the contents. Sometimes the unfinished are among the most beautiful symphonies. When we are not any lengthier capable to alter a predicament, we're challenged to alter ourselves. What is demanded of man is not, as some existential philosophers teach, to endure the meaninglessness of life, but rather to bear his incapacity to grasp its unconditional meaningfulness in rational terms. The transitoriness of our existence in no way makes it meaningless, but it does constitute our responsibleness, for everything hinges upon our realizing the essentially transitory possibilities. We had to learn ... that it did not really matter what we expected from life, but rather what life expected from us. Fundamentally, therefore, any man can, even under such circumstances, decide what shall become of him, mentally and spiritually. He may retain his human dignity even in a concentration camp. I understood how a man who has nothing left in this world still may know bliss, be it only for a brief moment, in the contemplation of his beloved. It is the pursuit of happiness that thwarts happiness. Man is capable of changing the world for the better if possible, and of changing himself for the better if necessary. A man's concern, even his despair, over the worthwhileness of life is an existential distress, but by no means a mental disease. Happiness must ensue, it cannot be pursued. Man's last freedom is his freedom to choose how he will react in any given situation. Now, it is my contention that the deneuroticization of humanity requires a rehumanization of psychotherapy. It is a peculiarity of man that he can only live by looking to the future. Our main motivation for living is our will to find meaning in life. to him who saw no more sense in his life, no aim, no purpose, and therefore no point in carrying on. No one can take from us the ability to choose our attitudes toward the circumstances in which we find ourselves. This is the last of human freedoms. Such a value system might be responsible for the fact that the burden of unavoidable unhappiness is increased by unhappiness about being unhappy. A man who could not see the end of his provisional existence was not able to aim at an ultimate goal in life. It is true that we can see the therapist as a technician only if we have first viewed the patient as some sort of machine. As the struggle for survival has subsided, the question has emerged, survival for what? Ever more people have the means to live, but no meaning to live for. To think of ourselves as those who are being questioned by life daily and hourly. Our answer must consist not in talk and meditation, but in right action and in right conduct. These tasks, and therefore the meaning of life, differ from man to man and from moment to moment. Thus it is impossible to define the meaning in life in a general way. A human being is not one thing among others. Things determine each other, but man is ultimately self-determining. What he becomes within the limits of endowment and environment he has made out of himself. We dislike talking about our experiences. No explanations are needed for those who have been inside, and the others will understand neither how we felt then nor how we feel now. As such, I also bear witness to the unexpected extent to which man is capable of defying and braving even the worst conditions conceivable. inconceivable. The struggle for existence is a struggle for something. It is purposeful, and only in so being is it meaningful and able to bring meaning into life. The incurable sufferer is given very little opportunity to be proud of his suffering and to consider it ennobling rather than degrading, so that he is not only unhappy, but also ashamed of being unhappy. A sound philosophy of life, I think, may be the most valuable asset for a psychiatrist to have when he is treating a patient. We needed to stop asking about the meaning of life. There is also purpose in life which is almost barren of both creation and enjoyment, and which admits of but one possibility of high moral behavior, namely, in man's attitude to his existence, an existence restricted by external forces. The crowning experience of all, for the homecoming man, is the wonderful feeling that, after all he has suffered, there is nothing he need fear anymore except his God. I became acquainted with those martyrs whose behavior in camp, whose suffering and death, bore witness to the fact that the last inner freedom cannot be lost. Here lies the chance for a man either to make use of or to forego the opportunities of attaining the moral values that a difficult situation may afford him, and this decides whether he is worthy of his sufferings or not. Somewhere I heard a victorious yes in answer to my question of the existence of ultimate purpose. Having been is also a kind of being, and perhaps the surest kind. Which quote did you like the most? Share your opinion in the comments. Don't miss out on a chance to see the next video. Subscribe.